This is a man who has influenced millions of people throughout history. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, is sitting down at night writing notes to himself about how to be a better person, how to think better, how to manage his temper, control his appetites.
Imagine a battlefield that exists not just in land or empire, but in the mind. Two generals stand opposed across time and space. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor-philosopher, and Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese strategist. One draws a sword of Stoic wisdom. The other unsheathes the art of war. It's a clash of civilizations, Rome versus China, and a duel between West and East in how to fight, lead, and live. We're mixing historical storytelling with a dash of modern pop culture flair, so buckle up. Ever wondered what happens when a calm Stoic emperor faces off against a cunning war guru? This is Marcus Aurelius versus Sun Tzu, Philosophy of War, a showdown of strategy and soul. Welcome to Epic and Extraordinary. A bronze statue of Marcus Aurelius on horseback in Rome's Capitoline Museum. The emperor extends his hand in a gesture of calm command, no weapons drawn, reflecting a leader who preferred to bring peace rather than revel in war. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, that ruled from 161 to 180 AD, wasn't your typical Roman warlord. He was called the Philosopher King, who carried parchment and pen alongside sword and shield. History threw everything at him: invading tribes, a vicious plague, even an internal rebellion. Yet Marcus met chaos with stoic peacefulness. He led Roman legions on the northern frontier, fighting Germanic tribes, all while scribbling wisdom in his journal that we today know it as Meditations. Imagine writing self-help thoughts by lamplight in a war tent on the Danube River. Marcus did just that. War was his reality, but philosophy was his guide. Stoicism taught Marcus that virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, self-control was the highest good. He tried to infuse morality into warfare. This emperor didn't thirst for conquest. He saw himself as a guardian of Rome's peace. Remarkably, he even viewed his enemies as fellow humans deserving empathy. Marcus believed in universal brotherhood. Yes, even on the battlefield. One historian noted that despite years of brutal campaigns, Marcus advocated for universal brotherhood, treating even his enemies with compassion. Picture a Roman emperor who, after defeating a foe, offers them fair terms instead of slaughter. That was Marcus. He once wrote, "All men are made for one another. Either teach them better or put up with them." It's almost unbelievable. A conqueror who would rather educate his foes than exterminate them. And talk about emotional control. Marcus had a mantra. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In the fury of war, when arrows flew and friends fell, Marcus Aurelius would remind himself to master his own fear and anger. He even advised, the best revenge is to not be like your enemies. Think about that line. Instead of burning with vengeance, he'd say the real win is staying virtuous, not becoming the monsters you fight. Marcus was once mocked by a rival general for being too philosophical and mild. They sneered, calling him a philosophical old woman because he didn't rush into bloodshed. But Marcus didn't flinch. He responded with cool wisdom, basically. True manliness is calm kindness, not chest-thumping aggression. That rebel general learned the hard way that Marcus's restraint was not weakness. It was strategic strength. Stoicism gave Marcus a superpower on the battlefield, unshakable focus. No insult could provoke blind rage in him. No sudden setback would break his spirit. He treated panic and triumph just the same, with composure. Marcus Aurelius led by example. He endured the same harsh winters and rough camps as his troops. Legend says he even sold palace treasures to fund the army and help the people during plague years. A far cry from an emperor living in immoral luxury. His statue in Rome shows him riding with no armor, arm outstretched in a gesture of mercy, not victory, because that's how he saw himself. Don't get it wrong, Marcus fought hard wars. The Marcomannic Wars were no joke, but he didn't fight with hate. He fought with a sense of duty and a hope that once the dust settled, peace and justice would reign. Stoicism was his compass, and it kept him humane in a very inhumane time. Marcus Aurelius proves that a leader can be tough as nails in battle, yet gentle at heart. Think of him like the Captain America of ancient times, principled, inspiring, and resilient, the guy even enemies secretly respect. Statue of Sun Tzu in a Chinese museum exhibit. He sits in contemplation with a scroll, embodying the thoughtful strategist whose teachings became legendary. Now travel back 600 years before Marcus to ancient China and meet Sun Tzu. Or should we say, Master Sun. He is the author of one of, if not the most important history's ultimate strategy guide, The Art of War. If Marcus was the noble philosopher, Sun Tzu was the brilliant chess master of war. Different worlds, same arena. Sun Tzu lived during the spring and autumn period, around 500 BC, a time when Chinese states were constantly battling like rival houses in Game of Thrones. Traditions of chivalry were holding armies back. Everyone fought by rules, and wars dragged on in stalemates. Sun Tzu basically said, "Screw the old rules, I'm here to win." He introduced innovation and deception to break the stalemate. To Sun Tzu, war wasn't about heroic charges or honor duels. War was a means to an end, and that end was victory and peace on your terms. War is a vital matter of state, he wrote, a path to survival or ruin, so you'd better do whatever it takes to win. Sun Tzu's philosophy can be summed up in one of his most famous lines. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. In other words, the best way to win is to win before the battle even begins. Trick your enemy, suss out their plans, shatter their alliances, psych them out. So when your armies march, the opponent is already discouraged. He taught that every battle is won or lost before it's fought, through strategy and preparation. If Marcus Aurelius was about conquering yourself, Sun Tzu was about outsmarting everyone else. He famously declared, "All warfare is based on deception." To Sun Tzu, a straight-up fair fight was a failure of planning. Why charge headlong into a fortified wall when you can sneak in the back gate at night? Why fight at all if you can maneuver the enemy into surrendering first? Sun Tzu's life is wrapped in myth, but stories paint him as a no-nonsense general. The wildest tale? The concubine drill. The king of Wu supposedly asked Sun Tzu to prove his military theories by training the palace concubines. Yes, the royal harem, into soldiers. Sun Tzu split them into two companies, put the king's favorite women in charge, and gave an order. March right. The women just giggled. Sun Tzu calmly reiterated the command. They giggled again. What happened next is the stuff of legend. Sun Tzu executed the king's two favored concubines for disobedience. Harsh? Extremely. But after that, no one dared to giggle. The improvised unit performed flawlessly. The moral: Sun Tzu demanded absolute discipline. War is life or death, and he would not tolerate incompetence or hesitation. By the way, historians debate if this story is true, but its survival shows how Sun Tzu's reputation for ruthless effectiveness loomed large. Yet, here's the twist. Sun Tzu was ruthless only to be kind in the long run. His strategy was all about ending war quickly. Prolonged fighting, he warned, only exhausts nations. In war, let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns, Sun Tzu wrote. He was almost pacifist in principle. He hated war's destruction so much that he preached winning with minimal bloodshed if possible. It's like he thought, the most efficient war is one that's over before people can get killed. This is where Eastern philosophy flows in. Sun Tzu was influenced by Taoist thought. The Tao Te Ching, a classic of Taoism, speaks of overcoming by yielding and detesting chaos in war. Sun Tzu took that to heart. He saw war as a necessary evil to be minimized. If Marcus hoped to be a just warrior, Sun Tzu aimed to be a wise one who wins with brains so he doesn't have to spend bodies. Sun Tzu's teachings also reveal him as a master of psychology and morale. He told commanders to know themselves and the enemy intimately. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles, he advised. He emphasized speed, flexibility, and timing. Strike where the enemy is weak. Appear where you're least expected. Where Marcus might say, endure and stand firm, Sun Tzu would say, be fluid and unpredictable like water. And far from being a cold tactician, Sun Tzu understood the human side of war too. He insisted on respecting your troops and binding them to you. Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys, he wrote. Treat them well, and they'll fight like lions for you. He knew the value of compassion in leadership. A general who cares can inspire incredible loyalty. So while Sun Tzu is often imagined as this cunning puppet master, he was also a bit of a military Confucius, stressing order, care, and foresight. Sun Tzu's impact was massive. His strategies helped kings conquer kingdoms. In fact, his ideas of total war and deception were later used by the state of Qin to unify China for the first time. And his Art of War manual? It didn't stay in ancient China. It traveled through time, becoming required reading for generals and leaders across East Asia and eventually the whole world. Today, it's poured over in West Point, in business boardrooms, by sports coaches, even by politicians lawyering up for campaigns. Yes, when you hear a CEO quote strategy with a sly grin, they might be channeling Sun Tzu. The man himself might be semi-legendary. Historians still debate if Sun Tzu was one real person or a compilation of wisdom. But it doesn't even matter. The strategy works, and that made the name Sun Tzu immortal. If Marcus Aurelius is the poster boy for mindful leadership, Sun Tzu is the master of winning smart, not hard. His legacy is basically the playbook for strategic thinking, period. Now let's pit these two philosophies head to head. What happens when Stoic virtue clashes with Sun Tzu's maneuvers? It's more than just West versus East. It's almost heart versus head, or perhaps soul versus skill. Here's the tale of the tape. Marcus's Stoicism came from Greek philosophy. It's deeply personal, about developing one's character and inner strength. Sun Tzu's approach came from a culture of constant warfare. It's intensely practical, about achieving results in the outer world. One is an ethic, the other a tactic. When thinking of war, Marcus starts with, how can I be a good person even in war? Sun Tzu starts with, how can I win with minimal cost? Stoicism says keep your emotions in check. Fear, anger, despair. Those can cloud judgment, so conquer them internally. Marcus would enter battle with calm determination, reminding himself that death and hardship are not to be feared, only dishonor is. Sun Tzu, on the other hand, wants to mess with the enemy's emotions. Make them doubt, make them angry, make them overconfident, then strike. He's basically inventing psychological warfare. Meanwhile, he'd advise his own troops to stay cool and coordinated, so in a way, he values calm too. But as a means to victory, not as a moral virtue. Honorable combat or clever tricks. Marcus Aurelius, bound by Stoic ethics, believed in not sinking to the enemy's level. No treachery, no needless cruelty. He once chastised himself and his peers. If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. That implies a kind of honor code even in warfare. Sun Tzu would chuckle at that. For him, nothing is off limits if it shortens the war and saves your state. Fake retreats, espionage, spreading false rumors, it's all fair game. Victory legitimizes the methods. To a Sun Tzu disciple, Marcus's honorable approach might seem naive. To a Stoic, Sun Tzu's cunning might seem cynical. This is a classic ethics versus efficacy dilemma. What was their view on role of the leader? Marcus saw a leader as a servant of the people, almost a parental figure morally. He tried to lead by virtuous example, staying humble and just. He even wrote about how leaders should not be tyrants but protectors. Sun Tzu saw a leader as a master strategist whose duty is to ensure success. He emphasized that a commander controls the fate of thousands and so must be supremely skilled and decisive. Importantly, both agreed a leader should care for his soldiers. Marcus treated his men with kindness and shared hardship. Sun Tzu explicitly said to love your troops like sons. So, ironically, a Roman Stoic and a Chinese general would nod on that point. Morale wins wars as much as swords. Marcus fought wars reluctantly to defend Rome. That was his view on the whole purpose of war. He likely would have preferred not to fight at all, but duty called. War was something that tested your righteousness. You had to engage in it without losing your moral compass. Sun Tzu saw war as a means to impose your will and restore order. War is politics by other means, in an ancient form, an idea Sun Tzu voiced long before Clausewitz. To him, war had to end with a stronger state and ideally a lasting peace under the victor's terms. If Marcus and Sun Tzu sat down, they might both agree that war should end in peace. But Marcus would insist on being just in victory, whereas Sun Tzu would insist on being wise so that victory is certain. Does this sound like they share similar strategies? You'd be surprised that these two weren't entirely at odds. Marcus Aurelius also valued intelligence and preparation. He wouldn't have won battles just by being a nice guy. The Roman army excelled in discipline and tactics. Though Marcus himself wasn't known as a tactical genius like Julius Caesar, he had competent generals. Stoics also taught using reason and foresight, which aligns with planning. And Sun Tzu, for all his trickery, actually shared a Stoic-like aversion to rash passion. Sun Tzu warned against going to war out of anger or impulsive pride, since those emotions lead to mistakes. He advised, "He who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not will be victorious." That prudence sounds almost Stoic. So both philosophies prize self-control. Marcus in a moral sense, Sun Tzu in a strategic sense. Neither would endorse charging off in blind fury. Think of it this way. If Marcus Aurelius and Sun Tzu played a game of chess, Marcus would play a patient, principled game, never cheating, staying cool under pressure. Sun Tzu would play an aggressive, deceptive game, maybe sacrifice his queen early as a feint, and then checkmate when you least expect. Marcus's strength is integrity and morale. Sun Tzu's strength is intellect and manipulation. One isn't simply better than the other. They're almost designed for different arenas. Stoicism shines in maintaining humanity amidst conflict. Eastern strategy shines in winning conflict with minimal cost. Modern leaders have tried to emulate both. Military academies study Sun Tzu's tactics for strategy and also assign Marcus's meditations for leadership ethics. It's like how in Star Wars, you need both the wisdom of Yoda and the cunning of Obi-Wan to outsmart the Empire. Ultimately, Stoicism and Sun Tzu's art of war are two sides of the same coin: how to confront the inevitability of conflict. One focuses inward on mastering the self. The other focuses outward on mastering the battlefield. Combine Marcus's heart with Sun Tzu's mind, and you might just get the perfect warrior. But history teaches us you rarely get everything in one package. Time to bust some myths and surprises in this East-West matchup. For starters, Stoicism isn't about being an emotionless robot. People hear Stoic and think cold, unfeeling Spock-like figure. Wrong. Marcus Aurelius's life busts that myth wide open. He felt deeply, he loved his family. mourned losses, cared for refugees, and even for his enemies in a human way. Stoicism taught him not to be ruled by emotions, but it didn't tell him to kill his emotions. In fact, Marcus wrote about kindness and compassion constantly. He believed showing mercy in war wasn't weakness, it was strength. So the Stoic Roman emperor might actually shed a tear for a fallen comrade, then compose himself and do what must be done. Stoics have hearts. They just have them under control. And what about Sun Tzu? Many think Sun Tzu was just a sneaky warmonger, reveling in trickery and bloodshed. Nope. Here's a shocker. Sun Tzu probably hated war more than most of his contemporaries. His whole strategy was about ending wars quickly or avoiding battle outright if victory could be gained by other means. He was more like a doctor trying to cure a disease with minimal suffering. Myth was that Sun Tzu would backstab allies for fun, when in reality, he'd only deceive as a calculated means to save his state and troops. Also, the myth that Sun Tzu's teachings are only for war is shattered by how widely his ideas are applied to business, sports, and politics today. Whenever you hear someone say, "Pick your battles" or "Know your enemy," that's Sun Tzu's echo through the ages. Another myth. East versus West equals cunning versus honor. People often assume Chinese generals were devious while Roman generals were all honor-bound legionaries. In truth, Roman warfare could be pretty darn crafty since they used espionage, feints, and political trickery plenty, and Chinese warriors had their codes of honor too. Marcus Aurelius might not have been as tricksy as Sun Tzu, but Roman history has figures like Fabius the Delayer, who beat Hannibal with attrition and guile. And conversely, Sun Tzu emphasized integrity of command and treating people well, which is a moral dimension. So the contrast isn't black and white. Both cultures understood that war required brains and sometimes a bit of brawn and bravery. Lastly, a fun one. Some might mythologize these two as if they were superhuman sages who never failed. Not true. Marcus Aurelius struggled. He had setbacks in war. At one point, a general named Avidius Cassius rebelled against him. Marcus's response was forgiving, but still, a civil war almost happened. And Sun Tzu, if he was a real general, surely had plans that didn't go perfectly to script. War, after all, is unpredictable. What makes their philosophies impressive is that despite failures and the grind of reality, these ideas endured. Marcus's Stoicism helped countless people endure tough times with dignity. Sun Tzu's principles have guided armies and organizations to victory without reinventing the wheel each time. Their wisdom lives on because it works. Not every time, not like magic, but enough to tip the scales to those who need it. In short, Stoicism isn't soft, and strategy isn't soulless. Marcus Aurelius was tougher than he looked, and Sun Tzu was more compassionate than he sounds. History's greatest philosophies of war aren't about loving war at all. They're about handling the tragedy of war in the best way possible, whether by enduring it virtuously or ending it intelligently. Both Marcus Aurelius and Sun Tzu left huge legacies that extend well beyond their lifetimes. They became icons, Marcus as the ideal of the philosopher king, Sun Tzu as the epitome of the sage strategist. Let's start with Marcus. After his death, the Romans hailed him as one of the 5 good emperors. Why? Because under Marcus, despite almost 2 decades of war, the empire was in capable, steady hands. He didn't abuse power. He exercised it with wisdom and restraint. His book Meditations, which, remember, was his private diary, never intended for publication. Meditations became a timeless guide on how to live a meaningful life and lead with integrity. It's astounding that a Roman emperor's jottings are on bestseller lists in the 21st century, but they are. CEOs quote Marcus on conquering themselves before conquering markets. Athletes find inspiration in his words to stay focused and calm under pressure. Military officers read Meditations to learn calm decision-making in chaos. Marcus's ideas have resonated with statesmen like Frederick the Great and modern figures. There's a reason you see Stoic quotes all over social media. In fact, during the toughest moments of World War II, some leaders turned to Marcus's writings for strength. His legacy in leadership is the notion that true power is self-mastery and moral courage. We often hear the phrase Stoic calm that originates largely from Marcus's example. However, Marcus's immediate legacy had a bitter twist. His son, Commodus. Yes, the villain in Gladiator was based on the real Commodus. Took over and was pretty much the opposite of his dad, ushering in a period of decline. So, Marcus gets a bit of a tragic hero legacy too, the last good emperor, after whom things went south. Still, that doesn't tarnish what he accomplished and symbolized. To this day, many consider Marcus Aurelius a model of enlightened leadership, someone who wielded immense power with humility and humaneness. There's even a revival of Stoicism among modern entrepreneurs and thinkers, sometimes called modern Stoicism, with Marcus as the poster child. Who would have thought that a second-century Roman would become an internet meme for motivation? But here we are. Sun Tzu's legacy, on the other hand, is everywhere in global strategy. His work, The Art of War, is often called the oldest military paper in the world, and it's certainly the most famous. In China, Sun Tzu has been revered for ages. Generals studied him, emperors praised him. Fast forward to the 20th century, Mao Zedong used Sun Tzu's guerrilla principles in the Chinese Civil War. General Vong Nguyen-Giap cited Sun Tzu in defeating the French in Vietnam. Even American generals in the Gulf War employed Sun Tzu's idea of speed and deception to outmaneuver Iraqi forces. It's like every conflict you can think of, Sun Tzu had a hand in from beyond the grave. And beyond literal war, as mentioned, the art of war found crazy second lives in peace. There's the art of war for executives, the art of war for dating. No, we are not joking, and so on. When a book's advice is applied to chess championships and Wall Street boardrooms, you know it's influential. Sun Tzu has essentially become synonymous with strategic genius. You call someone a real Sun Tzu, and it means they're crafty and always plan 10 steps ahead. Culturally, Sun Tzu is often depicted in East Asia as one of the great historical minds. There are statues of him, TV shows, and he even features as a character in video games. His name often comes up with other greats like Confucius or military minds like Clausewitz. But Sun Tzu always has that edge of practical, can-do strategy that appeals to people beyond philosophy. And remember, there's debate about if Sun Tzu was one person or a composite, but if anything, that makes the legacy more mythical. He's like King Arthur, if Arthur had left behind a proven war manual. Both men also shaped the identity of their nation's military traditions. Marcus Aurelius represents the virtuous Roman general, fighting with discipline and duty. Many later European leaders looked back to him as an example of combining leadership with philosophy. Sun Tzu symbolizes the scholar-warrior ideal in East Asia, the general who wins by wisdom as much as by force. In a way, you could say Marcus influenced how the West thinks about the morality of war, while Sun Tzu influenced how the East, and eventually everyone, thinks about the methodology of war. And here's a legacy twist. These days, you'll find Marcus Aurelius quotes and Sun Tzu quotes duking it out on the internet for the title of most inspirational war wisdom. It's like they're still having a conversation, finishing each other's thoughts from opposite ends of the earth. Who says the dead don't speak? In sum, Marcus Aurelius left us the lesson that you can prevail in war without losing your soul. And Sun Tzu left us the lesson that you can win wars before they even start. Their philosophies of war have merged into our collective toolbox for facing conflicts of every kind. Whether you're dealing with office politics or actual battlefields, chances are Marcus and Sun Tzu have a line or two of advice for you. Their legacies live on in the leaders who strive to be both good and smart, the ultimate 1-2 punch. Now that we've unpacked this East-West showdown, it's your turn to weigh in. We've got to ask, which philosophy of war speaks to you more? Are you Team Marcus Aurelius, inspired by his stoic calm, empathy, and moral courage? Or Team Sun Tzu, wowed by his strategic genius, sneakiness, and efficiency? If you were a general, whose book would you keep in your camp? Meditations or The Art of War? And how about in life? Do you handle challenges with Marcus's grin and bear it with integrity approach? Or Sun Tzu's analyze and outmaneuver approach? Drop a comment and let's get a fiery discussion going. Perhaps you'd pick a Stoic leader as your mentor, someone who will keep you steady in the storm. Or perhaps you'd prefer a Sun Tzu-style coach, someone who always finds a clever shortcut to victory. Who do you think wins the battle of philosophies, and why? And here's a juicy one. If Marcus Aurelius and Sun Tzu somehow met face to face, what do you think they would say to each other? Would Marcus scold Sun Tzu for lack of scruples? Or would Sun Tzu convince Marcus to be a tad more cunning? Let's hear your take. Tell us your favorite quote from either Marcus or Sun Tzu. Is it Marcus's, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy," or Sun Tzu's, "Know thyself, know thy enemy, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories"? There's no right answer. In fact, blending both might be the real sweet spot. So sound off in the comments. Stoicism versus strategy. Who you got? What happens when philosophies collide? The battlefield falls silent. It's a cool dawn on an open plain that could be anywhere, the banks of the Danube or the fields of ancient Wu. On one side, Marcus Aurelius sits tall on a warhorse, clad in a simple breastplate over his toga, the morning light glinting off his bronze helmet. Behind him, ranks of disciplined Roman legionaries stand like a human wall of shields, their breaths fogging in the chill air. On the other side, Sun Tzu stands surveying the field, a fan in hand, robes flowing, with the elite warriors of Wu at his back, bows drawn, blades keen. Overhead, the sun creeps above the horizon, half revealing the combatants to each other. The stage is set for the ultimate east-west face-off. Marcus raises his hand, just like in that statue, a gesture of parley. He rides forward a few paces. Sun Tzu nods subtly, and one of his captains steps forward to meet the Roman halfway. But this isn't a negotiation. It's the first move in a mind game. Marcus speaks in a resonant, calm voice. "We need not spill blood today. Let us find honor in accord." His words carry, and for a moment, even Sun Tzu's men glance at each other, impressed by the foreign leader's confidence. Sun Tzu, however, expected this. He whispers to an aide, who signals a portion of his army hiding in the tree line, a flanking contingent creeping forward. Sun Tzu strokes his beard and finally speaks across the distance. "Warriors of Rome, do you know the ground you stand on?" Marcus furrows his brow, an odd question. "Beneath your feet," Sun Tzu continues, "lie pits and traps we laid overnight." At that cue, a Roman soldier shifts and, crack, the ground gives way a bit. The Romans realize with alarm, the field is riddled with dug pits and covered holes. Sun Tzu had anticipated where the Romans would form up. Murmurs ripple through Marcus's ranks. But Marcus Aurelius, unshaken, calls out, "Stand firm, steady men." He then replies to Sun Tzu, almost conversationally, "Our principles are deeper than your pits. We do not fear the unforeseen." That's pure Stoic guts. He's reminding his men that fear is the real enemy. They tighten formation, carefully repositioning away from the suspected traps, shields up. Crisis averted for now. Sun Tzu narrows his eyes. The Roman didn't panic. Time for plan B. He signals with his fan. Suddenly, from the east flank comes a thundering charge of cavalry. But riderless horses. It's a distraction. The Romans bristle, some turning to face the phantom charge. At that moment, Sun Tzu's archers loose a volley of arrows from the west. This is the real attack. Arrows whistle in. Marcus, seeing two threats at once, acts on instinct honed by years under fire. He stays calm. "Testudo formation, now," he commands. The legionaries know the drill. They bunch up and raise shields overhead and to the sides, locking into a tortoise shell. Arrows slam into Roman scuta, but most find no flesh. The riderless horses veer off harmlessly past the Romans. Sun Tzu's feint has met a wall of discipline. The general allows himself a tiny, impressed smile. These Romans are good. Marcus's composure and training saved them from chaos. Now Marcus seizes initiative. "Advance," he orders, voice like steel. The Romans begin a steady march, rolling forward like a human tank. Marcus Aurelius rides behind the front line, shouting encouragement. "Remember your duty, for Rome and for each other." His men cheer, pounding swords on shields. It's a wall of sound and iron moving inexorably. Sun Tzu knows better than to meet that head-on. He withdraws his front, luring the Romans further, perhaps towards another prepared surprise deeper in the field. The battle becomes a deadly dance. The Romans press forward with brute coordination. Sun Tzu's forces give ground while inflicting quick hit-and-run strikes. Marcus's philosophy in action is resilience. No matter what trick comes, the Romans adapt and keep cohesion, never breaking rank. Sun Tzu's men lit the grass aflame to disorient the enemy. Suddenly, fire erupts on the field. Marcus bellows, "Focus! This fire cannot harm your spirit." The Romans douse flames with earth and keep advancing like stoic terminators. Sun Tzu, ever the calculator, readies his final gambit. He has kept elite units hidden in the wings. As the Romans push into a narrow valley, Sun Tzu signals. Horns blare. Suddenly, war drums pound from behind the hills. Hidden infantry springs out, and the Roman legion finds itself encircled on three sides. It's the classic Sun Tzu pincer move, executed to perfection. For the first time, Marcus's army faces possible collapse. A lesser leader might despair, but Marcus Aurelius channels every ounce of stoic resolve. "We have been here before, men," he shouts, evoking a past victory. "Hold the line, fight as one. Fortune favors the brave." The Romans form a defensive orb, back to back. Sun Tzu's troops close in, their advantage in numbers now telling. Sun Tzu believes victory is at hand. The enemy is surrounded and outmaneuvered. Morale should break any moment. But then he notices, the Romans aren't breaking. They fight like lions, every gap filled, every man defending his comrade. Marcus Aurelius is in the thick of it, dismounted now, fighting with sword and shield at the front. Yes, the emperor himself in harm's way, calm and fearless. This bolsters his men beyond measure. Sun Tzu's troops hesitate at this Roman ferocity. Sensing the wavering, Sun Tzu calls for a retreat to regroup. He refuses to throw lives away on a gambit that might turn. The encirclement opens momentarily as some of Sun's units pull back to reform lines. Marcus spots the sliver of opportunity. "Forward, break out," he commands, and the Romans punch through the thinnest part of the ring with a disciplined charge. The circle becomes a wedge, and suddenly the Romans are no longer surrounded. They've cut out to the flank. The battlefield pauses in a tableau of exhausted warriors. Both sides have taken heavy losses, neither has a clear upper hand. Marcus Aurelius, breathing hard but steady, raises his sword high. Sun Tzu, from afar, raises his fan again, possibly to signal another cunning tactic. But at that very moment, a thunderclap signals a mutual realization. This could go on and on. A brutal slugfest of Marcus's willpower versus Sun Tzu's wits, with no true victory in sight. Both men, despite differences, share one belief. The best victory is a bloodless one. Marcus, always seeking a just resolution, and Sun Tzu, always seeking a smart one, might each consider parley again. Who would ultimately win? The camera pans away as the two brilliant leaders stand across the field, measuring respect for one another. Marcus Aurelius has proven his army's indomitable spirit. Sun Tzu has showcased unmatched strategic finesse. Perhaps, in some alternate timeline, they would join forces instead. Marcus ensuring the war is fought justly, Sun Tzu ensuring it's won swiftly. In the end, this clash of titans isn't about East or West, ancient or modern. It's about two ways of thinking that together tell the full story of war. The mindset to endure anything, and the mindset to achieve anything. Marcus Aurelius versus Sun Tzu is a battle between enduring principle and relentless strategy. And perhaps the ultimate lesson is that a truly great leader needs both. Who wins this epic face-off? We'll leave that for you to decide and debate in the comments. One thing's for sure, when virtue and strategy unite, the philosophy of war becomes the philosophy of victory, in every sense of the word. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, subscribe and never miss another epic and extraordinary story.